Hi, this is Brother Richard. Today we're continuing in our study, Lesser Creation Spirits. We're going to take a look at what the scripture talks about the nations. Principle. Scripture indicates in the Luciferian era, the nations, or the masses, were those intelligences placed as residents in the physical universe by Elohim. So the nations are defined as the masses of intelligences which were placed in their abodes in the physical by Elohim. Turn to John, Gospel of John, 14th chapter, verse 2. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. So what we have here, the word mansions means abode, dwelling, a staying place. They're all inhabited. And the Lord is saying, I'm going to prepare a place for you, not a mansion. What is the differentiation of this? It means that he's going to prepare a place in which they will oversee and administer the mansions of in the Father's house. The mansions are the abodes of the nations, the masses. Principle, Scripture teaches, ultimately, they all came under Lucifer's influence. Turn to Ezekiel, 31st chapter, verse 6. All the fowls of heaven made their nests in his boughs. Under his branches did all the beasts of the field bring forth their young. And under his shadow dwelt all great nations. So we find, knowing that this took place long before the human race's advent, when we see the word nations in the scripture, it does not always refer to human masses. Many times it's referring to non-Adamic intelligences. The scripture teaches the nations were corrupted by Lucifer over a period of time. He took what once was holy and pure abodes and corrupted them through introducing things into them that defile them. And they were also places of worship. Lucifer basically had a multifaceted position, administrator and spiritual overseer. Turn to Ezekiel 28, verse 18. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries. The word sanctuaries there means literally holy places. Thou hast defiled thy sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities, by the iniquity of thy traffic. So the key to the defiling of these holy places was him inserting trafficking, trade, mercantile system. Therefore will I bring forth a fire from the midst of thee, it shall devour thee, and I will bring thee to ashes upon the earth in the sight of all them that behold thee. Now, when we look at verse 14 of the same chapter, we see his position as spiritual overseer. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. The anointed cherub that covereth means that his wings overshadowed the throne of God in a specific region. It means that he was the worship leader. It means that he was the individual that was able to inspire veneration and reverential worship of Elohim. That was one of his main duties. So where he went, things that he did, he erected holy places for the veneration and worship of Elohim. he was literally a priest in that context. And ultimately, when he turned, and iniquity was found in him, he proceeded to develop a system in which worship, veneration of Elohim would cease or be turned to him rather than the Lord. Now we find that Lucifer's method of operation never changes. He did the same thing in the current Adamic era. Turn to the Gospel of John, 2nd chapter, verse 13 to 16. And the Jews' Passover was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and the changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, overthrew the tables, and said unto them that sold doves, Take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. He was really angry. Now, who inspired these individuals to do this? Turn to the Gospel of John, the 8th chapter. John, the 8th chapter, we're going to read verses 37 to 44. Jesus speaking, I know you're Abraham's seed, but you seek to kill me because my word hath no place in you. I speak that which I have seen with my Father, ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered and said unto them, Abraham is our father. Jesus saith unto them, If you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. Ye do the deeds of your father. Ye do the deeds of your father. Mercantile system. Money changers. Then said they to him, We be not born of fornication, we have one Father, even God. Jesus said unto them, If God were your Father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech? Even because you cannot hear my word. Ye are of your father the devil. And the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. These are spirits of the nations that are incarnate in earth. Luciferian influenced spirits to do his bidding and effect his mercantile system. And Jesus is speaking plainly. But of course, people are going to take this and they're going to make it seem like it's an allegory or basically take down the contents of it. We've already heard interpretations of this. He's saying what he's saying because he's taking a literal perspective. These are spirits, they're spirits incarnate in the human race with the sole purpose of blunting Elohim's purpose for man and shifting it to Luciferian's purpose for man. Now we find in the Luciferian era, the same thing took place. His nations that he programmed defiled the sanctuaries and caused the system to become corrupted. Scripture indicates many of those of the nations perished in hell at the time of Lucifer's fall. In other words, this didn't just happen suddenly. This took place over a protracted period of time. They corrupted themselves, set in motion a law of sin and death. Violence rose from one end of the creation to the other, and ultimately people were being brought into a state in which they were suffering as a result of the things they did, and their souls were going to hell. By the time the Luciferian revolt took place, multitudes were going with him. He was cast down for one reason. They were going to hell for a totally different reason. Turn to Ezekiel 31, verse 16. I made the nations to shake at the sound of his fall. When I cast him down to hell, with them, the nations that descend into the pit, and all the trees of Eden, the choice and best of Lebanon, all that drink water, shall be comforted in the other parts of the earth. So you had a plurality of individuals that went down to hell simultaneously. Lucifer, because he tried to extend his rule into the heavens. Those that were not involved in the Luciferian revolt were taken down to places where they would be given sanctuary, where their basic needs would be met. And those who were living defiled lives, and as a result of the transgression, brought upon themselves damnation. Same thing will be happening in earth today. You have gangsters, you have drug dealers going to hell consistently. You have people who are doing things that are bringing upon themselves swift destruction. Yes.
So they're all in the same region, but they have to be separated. The ones that fell and the ones that didn't fall. What's separating them?
Their motives. Those are their pure motives would go to the water regions, and they would find sanctuary there. Those that basically were living lives of wickedness, just like today, their motives draw them into torment regions.
What disallows them from going back and forth?
The law of sin and death wouldn't allow it. They go down to hell, and they go to a specific location where they are pinned and they serve their term. Or if they have the ability to locomote, it's still going to be in a central position in which they can't go beyond a certain place.
Are they all referred to as kings?
No, these are nations. Okay. I made the nations to shake when he fell.
Right.
So these are talking about the subjects of the kings.
Now, all of the subjects of the kings, all of the members, all of the population of the nations, I'm trying to say, are they all spiritual, or are any of those in the physical realm?
Combination.
How do we determine which is which, and what does that look like?
Take a look at this wreckage here that we're living in. You have planets that look like a Swiss cheese. You've got darkness all over the place. You've got asteroids whizzing all over. The physical is a remnant of what it once was. The next level above is the spiritual, where you have the same situation, only a less denser region. Yes.
Okay, we know, those that have been sitting at this table, that each planet has life forms on the interior of them. Now, in each planet, are all the life forms of favorable or unfavorable? Meaning, are they in restraints, or are they can they move around?
Oh no, they're survivors. They have a civilization, society. It's just subterranean.
What is their status, though? Are they fallen or unfallen?
Some are, some aren't. Okay,
so now that brings me, is there something that separates them in their realms?
Yes. Each one is unique unto itself. You take a look at our planet. You have beings in the subterranean. It can traverse to the surface or go out into space. Depending upon the history of that particular race determines the degree to which it has a freedom of access in this fallen creation.
And the current administrators know this.
Oh, most definitely. There's a connection between the principalities in the heavens and the nations in the subterranean. The only one that's kept in ignorance of this human race that hasn't got a clue of what's going on, although they see stuff coming up out of the ocean all over the place. They see UFOs, they see strange individual creatures, but government knows.
Yes, I was just going to say.
The government
some
knows.
humans that do know.
But it's gone out of its way to keep the population ignorant. Scripture teaches Lucifer's influence still dominates the spirits of the nations. They are as much under his influence now as they ever have been. Those that have been yielded to him since the Luciferian era, even though he's fallen, his influence is not slack. It still dominates their lives.
On that specific point, if you were to look at all of the nations and entities which come under the term Luciferian, what percentage would they be of the entirety of creation?
Well, it depends on which creation you're referring to.
The primary spiritual creation.
The primary creation in Lucifer has no influence whatsoever.
Okay.
It's an eternal creation that is outside of the corrupted scenario that we're dealing with. We're talking basically about the secondary creation, which is comprised of matter, some dense, some refined.
But you've explained in numerous Bible studies that many of Lucifer's followers are spiritual entities.
They are, yes.
So therefore, is it wrong to assume that he has some control in the spiritual realm?
Oh yeah, that's where most of his control is, but it's all centered in the secondary creation. It's confined in that Eretz region, whether the Eretz region is spiritual or densely material.
Okay.
It's still composed of Eretz.
So
Not
back
true
to the
spiritual.
all right.
Not the true spiritual element.
What percentage does the secondary creation make up compared to the primary creation?
Percentage of what?
Of matter, not antimatter, whatever we call entirety. What percentage does the secondary creation make up?
Oh, I would say it's infinitely small in comparison to the eternal state of the primary. Yes.
So are you saying that Lucifer has no influence on the primary creation?
None whatsoever. Never did.
Well, he was thrown down. We all know that, but we also know that his influence seems to be from the principalities who are high places. But the high places are still in the secondary creation.
Exactly. He fell down trying to ascend into the heavens. I will ascend beyond the clouds. Didn't make it.
Wasn't he given favor by the waters? I can't recall which verse we're talking about.
Ezekiel 31, yeah.
Perfect. At that point, at the time that he was given favor by those waters, were those waters part of the secondary creation or the primary creation?
Secondary. Everything is secondary creation.
Okay.
What happened was, initially, Lucifer's a primary spirit. The kings are all primary spirits. But what happened when the secondary creation was completed, they all took a residence in the secondary creation. They were taken from the primary and permanently housed in the secondary.
That leaving the primary into the secondary, is that the consideration of the fall? Or was that part of
No, that's part of the Father's plan. They set up an administration over the secondary creation within its confines. Yes.
Are there any unfallen Luciferians in the primary creation?
Unfallen Luciferians in the
Great
primary
question.
creation? I would say, depends on how you're defining Luciferians. If you're saying cherubim, yes. Angelic beings, yes.
When you say to us Luciferians, how are you defining Luciferians?
Those that were under his influence, part of his empire.
Okay, which we now know is limited to the secondary.
angelic groups are all primary spirits.
Just so I can get a better idea of this. At the time that Lucifer was created and instilled with so much power and authority to have his wings over the throne, what were the rest of his race doing? What was their business? What was their job? Prior to them falling, I'm talking about.
Basically, they were to set up estates in the secondary creation in which they would develop, nurture, administer the life forms that Elohim chose to place in the secondary creation.
So that was immediately their purpose. They were, excuse me, they were created, devised, and then immediately began the work of the secondary creation.
No, initially they were created primary spirits, and for an extended, I won't say time because there's no time in the primary, but for an extended period, they had tasks that they were doing in the primary creation. When the secondary creation came into being, it altered their schedule, if you will, because the Father's master plan at that point was set in motion. So they, at that point, were conscripted from the primary to come into the secondary to administer the Father's creation.
What would their tasks have been in the primary creation prior to them moving to the secondary?
Well, that would be something that's beyond a planetary comprehension.
So there's no way we could understand it.
So they were not developing life forms in the primary creation.
No.
Yes.
No.
So I'm trying to figure out where Jude 6 comes in.
Jude 6 is all dealing with the secondary creation.
So it sounds like they themselves were being developed.
No, they were created for specific functions, like for instance, thrones, dominions, principalities, rulership, administration, but in a way that is not planetary centered, because the primary creation operates radically different than the secondary creation. It's like Adam was brought forth to till the soil, but when YHVH established the garden, he got different duties.
Right.
Well, it was because YHVH was going from one thing to another as he brought forth whatever it was he was trying to do. But Elohim, in the initial creation, created them in a way in which they were adapted to the functions that he knew they ultimately would be participating in, whether in the primary or in the secondary. Now, Lucifer, when it talks about his wings overshadowed the throne, is not referring to the heaven of heavens. You find in Revelation, because there are no cherubim listed in Revelation at all.
Does it seem odd to you that the entities in the primary creation, not humans, had free will to actually disobey the Lord's instructions? He created them for a specific purpose, and for that purpose only. He told them to go and do this thing, and said, "No, thanks. We'll decide not to do it. We'll rebel." Doesn't that sound odd? If you look at the whole of the bigger picture of the Father's master plan, why would He create entities with the ability to be able to do that in the first place?
You're going to make me.
Okay, yeah, sure. So the thing of it is see, Lucifer influenced them. He was the favored cherubim. He was the anointed cherub that covered us. I need a little more explanation on that. But he was the one that everybody looked up to. All his contemporaries looked up to him. So they saw him, and they just acquiesced to him. And as a result, they were corrupted by the thinking. This guy's doing better. The water's good, so we're going to follow this guy. But at the same time, there has to be a decision that, okay, so I've been created. I have an appointment. This guy seems to be doing something that I'm interested in doing. Do I go against what I've been created for and follow this guy, or do I remain faithful to He who created me? I can just see that. But then, I'm dealing with human attributes. I have human capabilities. They don't. They were created perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why
That's the reason I asked the question.
There's an aspect that needs to be taken into consideration. In the primary creation, it is impossible to rebel. It is impossible to rebel. Because the conditions there are such that a thought of rebelling is impossible to encounter.
because there is no darkness. It's all light.
So all this took place in the secondary creation, where the conditions in which these things could arise were made available. The Father did this purposely. He knew he could never carry out his plan from the primary creation because the conditions would never come into being for a rebellion. So he had to create a lower creation in which the conditions over a long period of time could fester and come into being.
You answered another question which I didn't ask, which is, it isn't actually possible to have any form of dissent or rebellion in the primary creation. It cannot exist. It can only exist in a corrupt. But then that implies that just having the secondary creation, just having that in existence, allows for corruption, as if corruption, the ability for corruption, is built into that mechanism.
It would never happen except for one element that the Father added, and that was darkness. Lucifer triggered, he opened the Pandora's box, if you will, of the darkness element that was ingrained in the creation, but was never manifested until Lucifer did something that basically brought it into active influence. And it hit him first, corrupted him, and then he went and corrupted everything else.
Can you say he was the highest angel? I think no, because the stars were there.
But the stars primarily operated from the primary creation. Lucifer was the vice regent over all the Eretz.
All the secondary.
That's why when you read Isaiah 14, he's always looking to try to ascend, because his position is in the lower secondary creation. Now, Scripture teaches Lucifer, his nations, those that he influenced, will follow him unflinchingly. That's why the tares never get saved, because their programming is such that their will to get saved will never be engendered, never be triggered. That's why Jesus told the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not come to me that you might get eternal life.
Is that the same as saying that there is no capacity for them to have that will, even if they tried?
Well, no, they could do it if they wanted to. But Lucifer is shrewd enough to make sure that they would never want to. And I believe the ability for them to incarnate in the human race was predicated off of that. He didn't want to lose anything that he had before. So he made sure, before they incarnated, they became human, that they would never acquiesce to the things of God.
He did that in the spiritual realm.
So Scripture teaches Lucifer will continue to dominate the nations until he is removed. Turn to Revelation 20, verses 1 to 3. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. Cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. After that, he must be loosed a little season. So what is effectively done is his influence is totally cut off from any intelligence receiving it.
If
for 1,000 years.
If someone were to ask you when the millennial period would start, in comparison to our own timeline, when would you say that would be?
When the millennium will start?
Yeah.
Well, before that, you have the tribulation period, which is more than 7 years. I would suspect it may be more like maybe 10 to 20.
The tribulation period. So are you saying that we're 10 to 20 years away
There's
from
a
that?
pre-trib and a post-trib, I guess.
Right.
No, the tribulation period could start any time. But when it starts, its duration, I believe, would be between 10 to 20 years.
How far away do you think we are from the beginning of, you say pre-trib, are we in the pre-trib time now?
No. The tribulation period hasn't started.
The pre-tribulation time.
I would say, yeah, we're in the pre-tribulation period.
So we're not in the she giving birth pains yet.
No, not at all. That happens at the collapse of the world governments. World governments have to collapse before the tribulation starts.
Right. The reason I'm saying that is because it looks to me, and we've had conversations about this, some of the things that are happening in the world. The Pope is trying to establish this triple religious state in Dubai. I'm just using that as an example. And the fact that he's telling Catholics specifically, not to pursue a direct relationship with Jesus. That looks like we've entered into those times, the pre-tribulation times I'm talking about. What I'm saying then is that we can't be too far away from definitely the fall of many governments in Europe, and we know that's the truth just from the immigration perspective. So what are we talking about? 5, 10, 20 years?
Before that happens?
Before that happens.
Oh, no. I think a lot shorter than that. We're in a global economy. That means everything is balanced in that respect. And you have so many different crises in so many different areas, geologically, socially, militarily, that any one of those things could trigger the collapse of the global system. And when that happens, then you're going to be ushered into what I call transition period. You'll be ushered into the pre-tribulation period, where two things will happen. Israel will be gathered back to the land. The church will be gathered back into communities. You're going to have the establishment of apostles, prophets, and the angel group. And then they will prepare the church for the tribulation period, because the church now wouldn't survive.
Right.
So I would say this whole thing probably in a time period 3-4 years.
Wow.
If there is a missile launch and then there's a retaliatory strike as well, can we presume that we were entering into the tribulation?
Well, not the tribulation, but the pre-tribulation. It would be a short duration because there's going to be an interference. We'd have to take into consideration that the Luciferian kings are going to make their move.
Is that what you call the interference? Okay.
I don't believe they will allow a long war because their abodes are open to being impacted.
That's why I added 2 missile strikes, one and a retaliatory, because one is not. That's enough to stabilize. Okay.
Well, what would you probably have is, say, America and Russia launch. Well, China's going to get involved. India and Pakistan are going to get involved. Mm-hmm. So it'll escalate in a very short period of time. And I believe that the Luciferians will cut it short very quickly because they don't want this thing to get out of hand because their goals are threatened. Radical changes can take place overnight. And they will be radical in such a way that so many things are going to happen. The Father shaking the heavens, sky signs, things taking place that the mind of man can't recognize or identify or deal with, all happening simultaneously. Anyway, so he said that the Luciferians are going to continue to dominate the nation. Lucifer is going to continue to dominate the nations until he's removed. He's removed in Revelation 20, verse 1-3. Now turn to Jeremiah 51, verse 41-44. How is Shishak taken? Shishak is another name for Babylon. It's also a name for the Luciferian, Lucifer's Babylon. How is Shishak taken? How is the praise of the whole earth surprised? How has Babylon become an astonishment among the nations? The seas come up upon Babylon. She's covered with the multitude of the waves thereof. Her cities, so it's not referring to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, which was one city. This is referring to an empire that's global, and things that are happening to it cover vast regions. One is underwater, flooded by the sea. Then it says, the seas come up upon Babylon. She's covered with the multitude of waves thereof. Her cities are a desolation, a dry land, and a wilderness, a land wherein no man dwelleth, neither doth any son of man pass by. So this is totally contrary to what we just read. This is a dry region of desert, not underwater at all. It's talking about the length and the tremendous, stupendous degree of broadness that Lucifer's province is. Verse 44, and I will punish Bel. Bel in the Hebrew is Baal, B-A-A-L, and it's referring to Lucifer himself. I will punish Bel in Babylon, and I will bring forth out of his mouth that which he hath swallowed up. And the nations shall not flow together any more unto him. Yea, the wall of Babylon shall fall. So his influence is going to be cut off. They will not be able to receive his influence anymore because he's going to be chained up in the bottom of the bottomless pit with a seal. Now, having said that, Scripture teaches at this point the sons of God will be given dominion, rule over all these Luciferian nations as part of their inheritance. Turn to Revelation 2nd chapter, 26 to 27. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power, authority over the nations. He shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father. So he has all authority in his hand. And the sons of God that receive the adoption of the fullness of sonship, he shares his authority with. In this particular case, the overcomer that's a king is going to be given dominion, rule over these Luciferian nations. Life and death authority to make them shape up and come under God's way of life or suffer the consequences. Now, Scripture teaches if they do not embrace God's way, they will be imprisoned in the abyss and judged at the great white throne judgment. Isaiah 60, verse 12. For the nation and kingdom that will not serve thee shall perish. Yea, those nations shall be utterly wasted. Turn to Psalms 9, verse 17. The wicked shall be turned into hell, and all the nations that forget God. So what will happen is they will ultimately, depending upon the ruler, the Son of God that's ruling these Luciferian nations, he says he has the discretion to do what he wants to do with them. That's why he says he will rule them with an iron rod, and they will either bend or they will break. And ultimately, if they do not bend, then they're going to wind up being cast into the lake of fire at the great white throne judgment.
Angelic interpretation of time, non-existence. Okay. Yeah. So
And also dependent upon the degree of advancement of the angelic intelligence. An angel would see eternity radically different than an archangel, because the archangel has a higher perspective.
That brings it into question for me the levels of the angels. Since that's once we're glorified, we will now be above all of the angels, which includes the dawn stars.
Right.
What level of angelic society essentially works for us, becomes our administrators, handles our business? Everything?
All of it.
So the interesting thing is, okay, we know that the unfallen Luciferian angels that decide to use their created abilities and are used by the sons of God to do their administrative capabilities. Okay, so there's this group, and then there's the unfallen star group. The unfallen star group takes the advanced level entity or life forms that have more ability to understand, or so the Luciferians, they're cedars. Okay, they're cherubim.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
They're not fallen, so they're going to be used to administer life forms.
Under the sons of God, yeah.
Okay. So where did the star group come in? What group do they minister? What?
Well,
who would they report to? Who would the
yeah, I believe there's going to be a chain of command, just like you have now.
Right.
Only difference being the sons of God are at the top.
Okay.
Rather than the dawn stars.
All right.
And everybody reports to the sons of God because they inherit all of these angelic groups.
At that time, is YHVH considered a god by humans?
At what time?
At the time that the sons of God, the Prototokos group, sons of God, have become senior to all angelic races.
The mortal humans? Yeah, I don't believe so. He'd be considered a god, he'd also be considered an angel.
Does that imply then that Prototokos members who have been glorified also will be looked upon as God?
Yeah. You're going to be looked upon as supreme.
Because that's where that John thing comes in, doesn't it?
What's
where,
that?
where John thought he was bowing down to, the angel he was bowing
Yeah.
to. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay,
Yes.
so now we have raptured saints. Some are the bride, some are not, but they're still above. They don't make they're not part of the bride. Are they still above all the angelic races?
You mean the ones that make everybody that makes the rapture is going to be above everything in the creation.
Okay.
The only difference, the bride is going to be outside of the creation. The priests and the kings will be the highest form within the creation. Because the bride is taken directly into the Godhead.
So then, if you are born again, raptured, but you don't particularly apply yourself to the word, and that may be a misnomer in itself, but you understand where I'm going. You could, I've got to be careful how I use this term, you could do the minimum and still claim a very, very juicy kingdom.
No, it won't happen that way.
But you said that you'd be above all of the angelic creation.
Yes, but to get raptured, you have to put your time in.
You've got to put your heart and
There's
soul
no
into it.
sliding, no slacking, no. There's going to be an evaluation before the rapture takes place.
This is the point where the mainstream church and our own studies clearly diverge, because the mainstream church believes that anybody who is a Christian, anyone who goes to church once a week, is going to be in the rapture.
Yeah. Yep.
And they honestly believe that.
Yep. That's the Tim LaHaye viewpoint of the rapture. Yeah, remember those old movies? They had Mark of the Beast and There was another one where everybody disappeared, nobody knew what was happening. And they were trying to get everybody to confess Jesus. And the idea was, all you have to do is be saved,
Right.
and everything else would fall into place. It don't work that way.